Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. I'm going to show you one of my rituals that I have almost every morning and then give you some of my insight of what I am investing in at the moment and what I am keeping my eye out for. So this week we're going to focus on Modern. We've kind of done Standard for the past few weeks now. I'm going to definitely be looking closely at Standard for the Pro Tour coming up. There have been some cards that have spiked up in anticipation, one of them being Torrential Gearhulks. One of the benefits for joining my Patreon is I do give out tweets or just messages on Patreon about cards that I think are about to go up. And in the past, I've talked about Kolgan's Command, which has tripled in value since I said to invest in it. Cards like Rite of Passage or the Restore Balance. And recently, I told my patrons to invest in Torrential Gearhulks. I got in at $13.75. They have, of course, gone up now to around $30 a pop. And I think that if this is something you're interested in, this is something I keep my eye open and I try to look out for my patrons. Again, it's one of the benefits for the tier. So now that we're over the shameless self-promotion, let's get on to one of my daily rituals when I look at Modern. So the first thing I do is load up MTG Goldfish. And there are different pages that you're going to look at. So the first one, you're just going to take a look at the Modern metagame. If this shifts quite a bit. Modern is actually to the point that I might actually want to come back to Modern, as it looks like the fair decks are starting to take over, at least the fairer decks. We're finally seeing the Affinity and the Death Shadows aggro really keeping these combo decks that I don't like to play against in check. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The Modern metagame does shift a lot, though, because it does have a pretty self-regulating metagame at the moment, to whereas one deck becomes the top dog and it can get hated out. As you can see that in the top three here, or the top four here, three of these decks are very easy to hate out. Storm, Dredge, and Affinity, if you have the right package to hate these particular archetypes out. So I actually do like investing in sideboard cards that answer the tier 1 decks. So for Affinity, for example, Stony Silence is very good against Affinity. You also have a lot of other cards like Shatterstorm, and I mean there's a lot of new ones that have come out in the most recent sets that are very good at combating Affinity. But Stony Silence has really been my go-to card, and I made a killing off of Stony Silence back in the day. It was an MTGO spec. I spec'd in at 5 cents a piece and sold out at $2. And so I made a lot of tickets on MTGO. It actually kept me kind of fed with all my brews for about a year on MTGO. So I've been looking for other specs. I got into, for Dredge, for example, got into Anger of Gods. Anger of Gods is I got in around, I think around 20 cents to 50 cents a piece on MTGO, and I think they're currently selling for around 2. So I'm waiting for Anger of the Gods to go up slightly more to really sell on MTGO. But the same strategy can be done for paper. Usually I like to say the MTGO is about a month ahead, 2 weeks to a month ahead of the spikes in paper. So if there is a card spiking up on MTGO, it might go crazy within 2 to 4 weeks in paper. Keep in mind, though, the MTGO has a different economy because they have a system called treasures. That whenever a card gets too valuable or too popular, like a lot of people trading for it, they will include it in the next batch of treasures, which will then kind of mitigate the price of those particular cards. So anyway, the first thing to do is check the Modern metagame. And so you can see here that Affinity, Tron, Dredge, Storm, Death Shadow are the top 5. We have Burn and Nightfall and Abzan coming in. I think Nightfall and Abzan are very good against Death Shadow. So, of course, those Green Collective Company decks or just basically attrition decks are going to come and try to fight Death Shadow. Affinity, of course, has just slipped in because when people do not have the hate against them, Affinity becomes the top dog. Same thing with Dredge. They're both very alive and well, and Eldrazi Tron is still one of the better mid-range type decks. It can actually have some very explosive draws. And you'll see that the Eldrazi Tron or Bant Eldrazi it's usually always one of them's in the top 5. So the other thing I like to do is look over these recent events and look for any trending decks or anything that isn't necessarily on this list here, but a lot of people are having success with. And that way you can identify some undervalued cards. So you just start clicking through some of these to see exactly what this is. So this is a Blue Tron, for example. Maybe Solemn Simulacrum is low. Maybe it's time to invest in Solemn Simulacrum because it just got a reprint, and $4 a piece is the time to get in. Or you might see a lot of 4-ofs of a particular card that might be very undervalued at the moment and is a great pickup. For example, I think Gifts Ungiven, with Storm being a top dog, is pretty much undervalued at the moment out of Modern Masters. So it's not one of the cards, actually it is, spoiler, one of the cards that I am going to be talking about that I'm currently investing in. So yeah, we'll get onto that in a second with the particular cards that I am targeting. But yeah, this is exactly my strategy, kind of one of my daily rituals of trying to identify cards that are going to go up. So then we have, yeah, you see, keep going down these lists. I really do like Elves at the moment. There is a card out of here that I'm also going to be talking about that is going to be, that I am particularly targeting in more bulk range, as it is a very, very undervalued card for how much it sees play. And the set that it's in, it's one of the summer sets, the core sets. It's something that has the best chance of going up long term, just because in comparison to other packs, if they are like a block pack or especially a first set pack, they are not open nearly, or they're open way more than the Origins or the Course type sets. So I think Elves is starting to have a resurgence because it has the Devoted Druid combo with the Vizier from the Amonkhet set. So you're seeing a lot of green-white Elves, and this is just an old school Elves list. Elves are very solid. I mean, they have game, especially when people aren't running a lot of removal or attrition. They have a lot of game. Versus many of the more combo-based decks or aggro-based decks that can just out-aggro, out-combo those particular decks. So anyway, I highly suggest that you start the senior ritual to start looking down these. Sometimes I click on these decks that don't have a name to see if there's a new archetype that's coming up, and if there is a new archetype, this is the time to invest in. So for example, here's one that I haven't looked at. This sort of looks like just a Tezzeret Agent of Bolas list, which is pretty sweet, and it's using the Consult the Necrosages. For example, this could spike up. Choose one, target player draws 2 cards, or target player discards 2 cards. Other than, I don't know why Consult is in here. This just feels like, oh, because this is basically, you don't have to add white. Isn't this exactly what the Charm does? The Esper Charm does at instant speed, though? Yeah, I'm not sure that this is the right route to go. But for example, this deck had 4 of them. We could see a spike just because this person did get a 4-0 finish with this particular deck. Has like Ratchet Bombs that are undervalued, things like that. So anyway, that is one of my greatest advice, is to go down and look at these daily and see if there is any sort of trending decks. Look at the metagame. The other really good place on Goldfish is to look at the most played cards in Modern, and then just expand this and go to the kind of the 50 and look through them and see if there are any cards that are undervalued at the moment. For example, I do like Birds of Paradise. It was just reprinted in Conspiracy. Other than, I think that Iconic Masters will probably have Birds of Paradise in it. So I highly warn people of investing in Birds, even though it is a very popular card in Modern. I think it's going to be in Iconic Masters. But you can definitely scroll down this and see for any cards that are, just click on these. So if, for example, you can look at Street Life. Oh, it's low right now. How about Rest in Peace? What's it sitting at? And try to make a good guess on where it's going to move based on the information you have. So then we go over to so that's just kind of my ritual. That's what I do every morning. Wake up, look at the MTG Goldfish, look at the metagame, look at the recent events, look at the most played cards, look at some events, the particular decks that are new, especially in Modern. That's the best way. So if there's a new deck that has showed up in the right column here, and just look at the cards that are really key pieces of that aren't currently seeing any or haven't seen play until then, they might be very undervalued, and it's time to pull the trigger on that. And you can make a nice little profit just based upon the hype of when a new deck 4-0s or 5-0s in a daily. So let's go on to the particular cards that I am investing in. So first of all, I am going to give you my bulk pick, which is Dwynen's Elite. Dwynen's Elite, I think, is very undervalued at just 50 cents a piece. I like to target these in bulk bins. So you should go to your local game stores and see if they just have these in their bulk uncommons and commons. Also, target drafters. a really key strategy of mine when I lived in the Salt Lake area was just to find the people that draft, and I didn't see them in the standard or modern tables. And the drafts, I'm like, hey, do you have a bunch of draft trash laying around somewhere? I'd like to buy it. And you offer them like bulk rates. For example, I give between $3 to $5 per thousand, depending on the situation. I'll give even more, like $7 to $8 if it's unsorted, if people really don't know what they have. For some of these older collections. But even with drafters who do know what they have, a lot of times these type of cards just get thrown in their draft trash because at the time when they were drafting it was a quarter card and wasn't worth holding on to. So I mean, you find lots of cards that eventually become $1, $2 cards, and this is just really, really it's free money in my. I mean, there's a lot of sorting involved, but I kind of find sorting cards a little bit cathartic, and just it feels like a treasure hunt to me when you find cards like the Dwayne's Elite. So I really like this one because it sees a lot of play in Elves. It has actually even seen play in Legacy from time to time in Legacy Elves, as it does create 2 cards for 1, and it really combos very well with the Druids that you can tap them to add, tap 3 untapped Elves to add green to your mana pool, green, green, green. So it's one of the key cards. Very good with Court of Calling as well. So in most of the modern lists, it's at least a 3 to 4. And don't let the uncommon scare you. An uncommon out of Origins is probably like a rare out of Kaladesh. That's how much overprinted like Battle for Zendikar, Kaladesh, and Khazad-dûr Kirr, those type of sets are. So I do like this. The foils do seem a little bit, they still seem underpriced. I bet this could be an $8 foil within 2 to 4 years with the Dwayne's Elite. One thing I have to say, a little bit of warning about this, is we do know that the information that we have was Commander of 2017 is going to be Tribal. And I mean, they've already done a tribal elf decks though with the couple of years back with the green. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I hope they don't do it because it's just been overdone. Goblins and elves have been overdone. Alrighty, so on to the next card that we already talked about is Gifts on Given. I think the Gifts on Given is pretty low for how much play it sees. It's a 4 of in most of these Storm decks. And Storm is the kind of the breakout deck of the last month. You see a lot of Storm. It is, without having vulnerable pieces like the Pyromancer's Ascension, and you can just basically work off your graveyard. Gifts Ungiven is very, very powerful in this new Storms deck that just goes and grabs 2 or 4 of different cards. So you go get your Past in Flames, you go get a Grape Shot, you go get 2 rituals or draw spells or something like that, and it's basically a 2-for-1 with the Gifts Ungiven. Your opponent has to put particular one of them or 2 of them in the graveyard, which then you can get back with the Past in Flames. Past in Flames is also undervalued at the moment, but I think the Gifts just has a lot more, as we saw with that Blue Tron. You see some Gifts Ungiven. Every now and again, you actually will see an Unburial Gifts deck, which this is a key card in the. What they do is with Gifts Ungiven is they go and just get Unburial Rights, and then the card they want to reanimate, and then your opponent has to put those 2 in the graveyard, and then you can reanimate it. So you see like Elish Norn and Iona, those type of cards with Gifts Ungiven. So this card has been a pretty standard card in Modern for quite a while, or staple card in Modern for quite a while. And I think that $4 is pretty undervalued. We don't know exactly how the market for Modern Masters 3 is going to pan out. I'm thinking it's going to be very similar to Modern Masters 2, and it held its value for quite a while, and about 6 months later it started to dip just because the frustration of vendors not seeing their investment go up, so they just ditch it because they have to free up capital for other things, or just other players, same thing. So that's my one warning about this card and the next card I'm going to talk about, which is Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze is also a card that just sees a ton of play. We're talking about all of the green attrition-based decks, so Jund, Abzan, Sultai, all of those that use the Thoughtseized Liliana package. Scavenging Ooze is either going to be in the main or the sideboard. Then we have Death Shadow. It's usually a sideboard in Death Shadow. Zoo decks, it's been, especially with Burning Tree Emissary, those type of decks do usually have Scavenging Ooze in the sideboard because it's very good against Dredge. It's decent against Storm. It's great versus Goryo's Vengeance. It's good versus Living End. So at $2.50, I understand it's been reprinted quite a bit. So M14, Commander 2016, and now Modern Masters as a rare. But this card does seem like it has the most potential to go up. It's had another Commander printing, but that Commander printing was quite rare in the scope of things. So I really like Scavenging Ooze. Does see play in a lot of the Coco decks as well. If you can actually just scroll down here, you can see all of the decks that it sees playing. Nightfall being one of the combo-based decks that is another one of the flavor of the months. But even in Legacy, this originally was a Legacy powerhouse with like the 4-color Loam. You can also see them every now and again in the Sultai decks as a key card against any sort of graveyard-based strategy when Dredge is big. And yeah, I really recommend starting to dump some money in Scavenging Ooze rather than in other Modern Masters cards. I think this one has the most potential to go up. It's crazy when this is a $2.59 card, whereas Damnation is still holding at $20, and Damnation sees very little play in Modern. So now we're on to the juicy stuff, which I think are very undervalued. I think it's about time for the Eternal Masters to start ticking up in price, especially the cards that do see Modern playable, and especially the Dredge being one of the top decks, as well as all of the Tarmogoyf base attrition decks and Death Shadows particularly. Relic of Progenitus is very strong versus those because it shuts down the Tarmogoyf and the Traverse Ulvenwald aspect of the deck. So this also is a mess. If you've watched my videos for Skred, this is one of the key cards for Skred Red because it just takes care of all the graveyard based strategies. It's decent versus Storm. It's really good versus Storm if you get it off turn 1. You can start exiling their graveyard, and it actually is a lot better with this version of Storm. Because the old school version of Storm, they could just get 2 counters on the Pyromancer's Ascension, then Relic was pretty much, it was pretty bad at that point because they're just going to combo off with the Pyromancer's Ascension. But this new one, they are going to rely on recasting cards from their graveyard, and Relic is just really solid versus both Dredge, Living End, and Storm. And then again, it does work very well against many other decks that just try to get Delirium or try to get Tarmogoyf ticked up. So I think that $2 is pretty undervalued. It's only seen printing in Alara, and as well as it was in the event deck, and then now Eternal Masters and Modern Masters 1. So all those put together, that's not the greatest amount of supply out there, and I think that the demand is going to start to outstretch the supply. We saw when I looked at the commonly played, it was the 6th most played card, right behind Path, which they can reprint Path as many times as they want, and it still keeps going up. Thoughtseize, which has been spiking, Serum Visions, which just got a double reprint, Fatal Push, which is holding at $9, and Lightning Bolt, which I expect to go up a good 10 to 25% in the next year, just because it hasn't had a printing in a while. So Relic is right behind them. It does see less overall average played, so this number is a metric you do need to be aware of. But I mean, it's still that is a lot of play that this card is seeing, and the potential is just there. For this card to continue to just go up and up and up. The 2 cards that I'm really targeting at the moment, though, are cards that I see show up quite a bit in the sideboard that don't really make the top, 5, top 10, but there's enough players that do play these sort of archetypes, and one is Merfolk. Merfolk, Master of Waves, seems really low for a Mythic for me, for a card that sees play as a 4 of, in a deck that's really been pretty steady since the inception of Modern, especially I'd say within the past 5 years. You're always going to see Merfolk. It hasn't really won a Grand Prix in a while or won a lot of major tournaments, but it's usually in the top 8s. And you can see, look, so on the 7th, on the 5th, on the 26th, 2 of them, on the 25th, on the 23rd, on the 21st. So every other day about is when you'll see a 5-0 finish in the league. It's really good against green decks or creature-based decks because of the ability to kind of go over the top of what your opponent's doing. And cards like Harbinger of Tides and the Tidebinder Mage, if they do have them in the sideboard, are really good against locking those type of decks out or slowing them down. And it's just one of those decks that also draws cards very well with the Silvergill Adept. The Aether Vial can cheat stuff in. The Spreading Seas can lock out 2-color, 3-color decks. It's just got really game against every very solid choice in Modern, as it can go to toe-to-toe with most decks, and combo decks it does have some pieces like the Spell Pierce here and like the Spreading Seas to really slow those down. I've seen Chalice of the Voids in the sideboard, for example, for like Storm and other problematic matchups. Use a lot of 1-drops like the Death Shadows aggro. So there's a lot of versatility that Merfolk has to offer, and I think that Master of Waves, both the Master of Waves and the Harbinger of Tides, are very low at the moment, and I wouldn't. I've already sunk a lot of money in Harbinger of Tides in the past, but Master Waves is definitely the number 2 card that I'm keeping my eye out on, and slowly just putting in a bit of money here and there when I can find cards on TCG for like 250, 265 ish. And it's a great place if you can find, especially 4 of free shipping, to put your money into. So on to the number 1 card that I am currently investing in for Modern, and this is a long-term investment. Let me repeat that. This is a very long-term investment, and this is Madcap Experiment. The reason why I'm investing in this card is it's insanely low. This little spike is me. This is 100% me that spiked it from here to here. Because I've invested in over 300 copies of Madcap Experiment, and I've bought them all out under 30 cents. So I still do. If you log in right now to TCG, you can probably see that you'll find some under 30 cents. But the majority of like the juicy deals I've purchased because it's just a duh pick in my opinion. This is a 4 of in the Platinum Imperium deck. So let's just click on that and I'll show you the deck. So we have, it's the Madcap Moon. All of these will have the card in there. So Madcap Experiment, usually this is a 4 of, but usually it's Platinum Imperium and Madcap Experiment. And it just gives us an alternate way to win. So this is just a Snapcaster Mage control deck that can just switch gears and attack in with the Ventalion Clicks and the Snapcaster Mages. This one has a Goblin Dark Dwellers, for example. And if they have cards like Lightning Bolts, then the Snapcaster Mage ends up doing 5 damage a lot. The 3/1 evasive card that you can protect with counter magic is really good in this sort of archetype. They're just blue-red control. We've seen Delver in these type of decks as well. We've seen even, this used to be kind of the old Splinter Twin shell. This one is Blue Moon, though, they're running. So their alternate win con, though, is this Madcap Experiment getting in Platinum Imperium. And if a deck isn't using a card that can actually deal with the Platinum Imperium, which is actually a lot of decks these days, then you can just win because your life total can't change. It becomes like a worship type card. They can't beat you. And so if not, it's basically an 8/8 they have to take care of that you spent 4 mana for. It doesn't cost you any life because how Madcap reads is you reveal, then put it into play, then lose life. And the Platinum Imperium does not allow you to do that. So we see these type of decks show up all the time. We've actually seen decks that, like Nahiri, will just put it in the sideboard. So let's look at this deck, for example, and see if this is in the main or in the sideboard for these type of decks. Nope, this is in the main. 4 in the main, and so 4 and 2. And this one's just trying to what is this, a land destruction? Yeah, this is a land destruction type deck that then can get the Platinum Imperium out. So yep, and then every now and again you'll see it just as a sideboard package in the most random decks with the Madcap Experiment and the Platinum Imperium. So see if I can find one of those particular decks. See what this blue-red one is. 4 of, nope, a 4 of, and this one's actually going for Platinum Angel. This works very similar because the Madcap Experiment comes in. You do lose a ton of life though, so then if they take care of the Platinum Angel, you lose the game. Because your life total did change after the Madcap Experiment. It depends on how much damage the Madcap ends up doing. But this does allow you not to lose the game. Then they try to protect it with Pact of Negations. That's kind of cool, actually. Pact of Negations, Dispels, and everything. The usual suspects for this control-based package. And this one, again, is using Snapcaster and the Click. So, I don't know. To me, it's just a duh of a card that sees this much play in a modern deck, that over time, in the long term, that I think that this card will end up seeing a lot of, or will end up, yeah, of course, end up seeing a lot of play in modern for a long time, and it just has to go up. Kaladesh was just recently rotated out of drafting. What I mean by that is no one drafts it anymore. If you go to your local game stores, they're not going to be drafting Kaladesh and Aether Revolt. Everyone is going to be drafting Amonkhet. And then when the Hour of Devastation comes out, they'll be drafting Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation. And then the next set comes out, Kaladesh is just going to be forgotten about. So this card is just going to continue to start slowly ticking up as more and more people buy this deck. So there are kind of my picks right now. I really think that Master of Waves, Harbinger of Tides, and Madcap, those are the 3 that I'm really targeting right now. And the Relic of Progenitus, the Gifts Ungiven, and Scavenging Ooze, those are kind of the cards that I think that might have hit their bottom, but they're going to be there for a while until the supply can, the demand can outstretch the supply. And then if you're looking for a bulk pick, I like the Elite. So just a little recap of everything we've talked about. I think it's pretty solid advice. If there's any cards that you feel are undervalued or underrated at the moment, put it in the comment section below. And as a community, we can see what we can target. And yeah, so happy hunting. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.